I collapsed so fast I didn't even have time to pretend I was fine. A white-hot spear of pain lit up my lower belly, and for a second the kitchen tiles under my palms felt like the deck of a ship in a storm. I'm 62. I've had scares before, blood pressure spikes, a dizzy spell in the garden. But this was different. It felt like something inside me tore open. My fingers fumbled for my phone on the counter. I hit 911 and tried to form words while black flecks flickered at the edges of my vision. Emergency services? What's your emergency? I think my appendix burst, I gasped. I can't stand. The voice on the line steadied me with calm questions. Address, name. Are you alone? Yes, I breathed, forcing the syllables out. Elaine Porter, 214 East Mercer, Springfield. The paramedics were there before I could register the sirens I'd already heard. They strapped me onto the gurney, moved with crisp efficiency, and the world narrowed to fluorescent lights sliding past overhead and the taste of copper at the back of my tongue. My son, I croaked, clinging to my phone as they lifted me into the ambulance. I need to call my son. Dan had been my ballast since Henry died 5 years back. He and his wife, Brianna, lived 20 minutes away in a tan ranch house I'd helped them buy, with nearly half of Henry's life insurance. Front-loaded generosity, Henry used to joke. We either give it to the kid now to get him on his feet, or we let the lawyers nibble it later. I hit Dan's name as the siren began to wail. He picked up over the noise of laughter and clinking glass. Mom? I can barely hear. What's going on? I'm in an ambulance, I said, but it came out as ragged pieces. St. Joseph Medical, emergency surgery. They think, wait, we're at the Gunther's dinner party. Can this wait until morning? I didn't even have time to say no. The pain crested, blank and blinding. The phone slid from my hand. The last thing I remember was a paramedic saying something about sepsis and a rush order for the surgical team. I woke in recovery 3 days later with a tube in my arm and a nurse adjusting something on a monitor. A gray-haired surgeon with gentle eyes told me I'd been lucky. Another hour and the infection might have turned catastrophic, he said. You did the right thing calling. Through the medication fog, I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no texts. The silence looked loud against the screen. Did my son visit? I asked the nurse, throat raw as sandpaper. Daniel Porter? She scanned my chart. No visitors recorded, Miss Porter. Want us to call him? Please. I didn't trust my voice, but the word forced its way out anyway. Over the next 4 days, I called Dan 17 times, straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Mom. Call me. Then, I'm getting discharged soon. I'll need a ride. Then simply, where are you? I called Brianna too. Her ring never switched to voicemail, just rang into the void. They're probably busy, I told myself, even as the knot in my stomach had nothing to do with stitches. People get overwhelmed. People assume tomorrow exists. On the 7th day, Dr. Benson signed my discharge papers. You'll need help at home for at least a week, she warned. No lifting, minimal bending, and someone to change your dressings. Make sure you have support. My son will help, I lied, pasting on a smile that felt like tape on cracked porcelain. I took a taxi because pride is stubborn, and asking a neighbor felt like scratching at a scab. The driver, a chatty man with a St. Louis Cardinals keychain, made a few attempts at conversation and then respected the quiet when I failed to answer. We turned onto East Mercer, and for a second I thought we'd pulled onto the wrong street. My little split level, blue siding, white porch rail that Henry swore he'd repaint and never did, looked wrong. Then I saw the sign hammered into the winter dead grass. Sold. Ma'am, the driver said, noticing how my hand flew to my mouth. You okay? Cardboard boxes were stacked along the porch. My boxes, photo albums, a mixing bowl with a chip in the rim I could trace blindfolded. The quilt Henry's mother made in '79, folded wrong, sun just beginning to fade the corner. I wasn't moving. I hadn't planned to. I paid the driver with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking and took each stair like it might fight me. There was an envelope taped to the top box. Mom scrawled across it in Dan's handwriting, the same slanted loops he'd had since first grade. Mom, we sold the house. New owners take possession next week. These are your personal items. Brianna packed what she thought you'd want. The rest will be donated. We found you a great assisted living place. You can handle the details. You always wanted independence. Dan, the world tilted. I grabbed the railing. The pain from my incision was background noise compared to the something tearing inside my chest. My son had sold my home while I was full of IV antibiotics and anesthesia. Inside, the living room looked strange, wrong. The couch was gone. The dining table Henry refinished for our 20th, the one he sanded in the backyard while he whistled off-key, was just a rectangle of lighter floor where the sunlight hadn't reached. In the kitchen sink sat Brianna's white stoneware mug from the last time she'd come by and borrowed my stand mixer. Next to the mug, a glossy card for Desert Haven Assisted Living. I didn't need the brochure to know the monthly price would swallow my entire Social Security check, and then some. I called Dan. On the second ring, he answered. Mom, you're out. Why didn't you say something? We were waiting to hear. Daniel Porter, I said, and my voice surprised me, low and steady. What have you done? What needed to be done, he said, maddeningly calm. Dad's been gone 5 years. That place is too much for you, Mom. You fell. You could have died alone in that kitchen. So you sold my house without telling me while I was in surgery. It's our house too, he said. Dad left it to both of us. That wasn't true. Henry left the house to me. Years later, on my bank's suggestion, I'd added Dan to the deed as joint tenants to simplify probate one day. A convenience, not a surrender. A convenience I now wanted to rip out of time with wire cutters. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. That place on the card costs $3,900 a month. We'll cover the difference, Brianna chimed in from the background, voice sugary and brittle all at once. Besides, Elaine, you have that annuity from Henry, and we've been paying your property taxes for ages. Another lie. I'd paid every bill myself. I'd also floated their mortgage when Dan's contractor gig dried up 2 summers ago, but there's a point where listing receipts tastes like begging. I swallowed what I wanted to say and focused on air going in and out of my lungs, like I'd been taught by the physical therapist. I need to rest, I said finally. I just had surgery. Of course, Dan said. The facility expects you Monday at 9. I'll text the address. I hung up. I folded to the floor and let the tears come until the stitches throbbed a warning. When I was empty, something else rose. Cold, clear, familiar. Resolve. I might be 62 and stitched up like a rag doll, but I was still Elaine Porter. And Elaine Porter wasn't going to be managed like an inconvenient delivery. I slept on a bare mattress that night amid boxes labeled "Keep" in someone else's handwriting. At dawn, I called my oldest friend, Nora Whitfield, who lives an hour away in Mesa. Pack a bag, she said, after my halting, furious summary. I'm on my way, and I'm bringing the big car. By noon, she pulled into my driveway in a sensible hybrid, cheeks flushed, mouth already forming the kind of sentences she'd perfected in 27 years as a principal. I cannot believe he... Okay, I can believe Brianna. Elaine, what in heaven's name? People change, I said, the words tasting like defeat. Or maybe I just finally noticed who they were. We loaded what I could manage into Nora's trunk. She drove me to her place and installed me in the guest room with clean sheets and the strict care of someone who knows how to give orders in a kind voice. She changed my dressings, set an alarm for my meds, and left a glass of water within reach, like I was her most stubborn student. Next morning, we met my financial guy at a coffee shop. Not some slick downtown glass palace, just a corner table at Bean Barn, where they know how to spell your name on the cup. I've worked with Calvin Reyes for a decade. He's in his 70s now, a retired CPA who slides toward dad joke territory, but never crosses the line. "Elaine," he said, placing a folder between my coffee and Nora's tea. "I looked over your accounts. The portfolio we set up with the other half of Henry's insurance did well. Those tech dividends you kept reinvesting, they've been busy. Between the investments, your annuity, and Social Security, you have far more flexibility than you've been acting like you do." I stared at the column of numbers. My mouth might have actually dropped open. "That can't be right." "It's right," Calvin said. "You're not hedge fund rich, but you're comfortable if you're smart. There's no reason for you to be shoved into a place you don't want and can't afford." "What about the house?" I asked, throat tight around the word. "He was on the deed." Calvin sighed. "That's trickier. Joint tenancy muddies consent. But selling while you were incapacitated? There are elder law angles. I called Monica Patel at Patel and Laramie. She's excellent. She can look at whether your signature was properly executed, whether you were notified, all of it." "Elder law?" I tried to laugh and failed. "Do I look ancient to you?" "It's an unromantic term," he said, "but it protects people from exactly this kind of steamroll." By afternoon, Nora and I met with Monica in a tidy office that smelled faintly of lemon oil. She wore rimless glasses and spoke like someone who has spent her life translating jargon into English. "We'll file to contest aspects of the sale," Monica said, tapping a pen against a legal pad. "Given the joint ownership, we may end up with compensation rather than unwinding it. New buyers complicate unwinds, but we have options. More importantly, we'll lock down your finances, new accounts, trusted contacts, a trust structure with teeth. We'll also update your will and remove your son from any fiduciary role so he can't make decisions for you under pressure." The word remove landed with relief I didn't expect. I thought about Henry in the backyard, whistle off key, about kindergarten Dan with jelly on his face, about the note on the porch. Handle it. I nodded. "Do it," I said. The next 3 weeks were a flurry of forms and signatures, phone calls, and passwords. Monica filed a complaint regarding the sale. We rerouted my investments to a living trust, the Porter Living Trust, dated and notarized, the ink crisp and permanent. My will was updated. Dan was no longer the executor. I chose Nora and a professional trustee instead. "Complete separation?" Monica asked gently the afternoon we finalized everything. "For now." The words surprised me by how right they felt. Later, I might regret them. Right then, they felt like oxygen. "What's your plan for living arrangements?" Calvin asked when we met again. Because Springfield might be more trouble than comfort for a while. I'd been thinking about that in the 3 a.m. hours while the world is too quiet and your thoughts are not. "Arizona," I said finally. "I know that sounds sudden. Nora's cousin Joe has a small guest house in Scottsdale she rents month to month. It's affordable, sunny, far." "Far is sometimes healthy," Nora said, squeezing my wrist. "You can heal in the sunlight." I didn't show up at Desert Haven on Monday. Instead, I sat across from Monica signing papers that made me feel both ancient and brand new. Then, 2 days later, I boarded a plane with 2 suitcases and a canvas tote holding the family photo albums that hadn't made the porch cut. As the flight leveled above the clouds, my phone buzzed. Dan. Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me so we can sort this out like adults. Desert Haven says we're on the hook for the deposit. Like adults. I let out a short laugh that made the man in 14C glance over. I put the phone in airplane mode and stared out the window at the winter Midwest, giving way to red earth. Joe's guest house was a converted garage behind her stucco bungalow, with a tiny kitchen, a bathroom that smelled faintly of eucalyptus, and a patio where a mesquite tree cast dappled light across pavers. "It's small," she announced as she handed me the key, "but it's yours, and no one will tape a note to anything here unless it says free pie at the church bake sale. $800 a month, utilities included, a steal, and light years better than the sterile brochure smile of Desert Haven. I built a routine that felt like stitches coming out. Coffee on the patio watching a dozen tiny lizards race each other along the wall. Water exercise in the community center's warm pool. Aqua Core, the instructor called it. Gentle enough for my healing abdomen, but hard enough that I slept better. I wandered Old Town and the little museums. I went to the public library and checked out mystery paperbacks the librarian swore I would love. Joe introduced me to her book club, 5 women with sharp opinions, soft hearts, and a group text thread that could probably power a small city. I did not answer Dan, not at first. He called every day for a week. Every voicemail had a different flavor: annoyed, cajoling, wounded, managerial. Brianna texted numbers, the escrow account, the caretaker plan she'd mapped out, the monthly fees I was failing to consider. I saved the messages but didn't reply. Monica kept me updated on the legal stuff. "These things move like molasses," she warned, "but that can be to our advantage." 4 months in, out of nowhere, came an email that seemed like spam until the second paragraph. "Hello, Ms. Porter. My name is Lena Park, and I'm a producer with Sunrise Today. We're doing a segment on financial independence for women 60+ who've had to rebuild after a major life change. Attorney Monica Patel recommended you. Would you consider speaking with us? Publicly discussing the ugliest year of my life on national television sounded like volunteering to be a piñata, but the phrase Lena used, rebuild after a major life change, sat with me. Rebuild meant I'd done something, not just endured. It hinted at agency, at choosing. I said yes to a phone call, then yes to a Zoom, then yes to a carefully framed appearance with boundaries, no names, no details that would identify Dan or Brianna, no exact numbers. 2 weeks later, almost exactly a year after I woke up in recovery, I flew to New York. Joe made me buy a coral jacket that looked far braver than I felt. "You look like a woman who knows what she's talking about," she said, standing back with her head tilted. For once, I believed her. The studio was smaller than TV makes it look, all cables and scurrying production assistants. Lena met me at the door, tiny and fast, with warm hands that made me think of my 4th graders from back when I still wrangled spelling tests and school plays. She introduced me to the host, Carmen Ruiz, who had the rare talent of asking hard questions without making you feel ambushed. Makeup made me look like me, but slightly more alive. "Camera ready," the stylist said, patting powder like a benediction. Then they clipped a mic to my jacket, and before I could remember all the things I'd planned to say, we were live. The questions were smart and kind. Carmen led me through the basics. What happens when a life you assumed would run in a certain groove jumps the track? How to get a financial team that treats you like a partner, not a problem. I spoke about Henry, about being passive with money for too long, about learning to read the statements and ask questions. I spoke about boundaries that sound harsh until you realize they're the only way to keep your dignity. "So today," Carmen said for her closing, Elaine's diversified investments generate approximately $68,000 a year. That steady income gave her the space to rebuild her life on her terms. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My number, was supposed to be off limits. We'd agreed. I'd said it in pre-interviews with the promise it wouldn't be used. The red tally light went off. The segment ended. I smiled for the camera like nothing was wrong because I was on live TV, and there's a muscle memory baked into every woman of a certain age. Keep the surface calm. Deal with the rip current later. Backstage, Lena apologized immediately. Carmen went off script, she said. We can edit that out of the online version, but the live broadcast. It's done, I said, and I meant it. You don't unring a bell. And anyway, why did it matter if Dan knew? He'd already taken what I hadn't offered. Back in my hotel room, I set my phone on the nightstand and tried to focus on anything else. The skyline, the way the city hummed, the fact that I'd just been on live television without fainting. Then the phone lit up. Mom saw you on Sunrise. Call me. Mom, we need to talk now. Is that figure real? Where did that money come from? 9 missed calls piled into 12, then 16. By the time I zipped my suitcase, the tally read 17 missed calls and a staircase of texts, all from the same 2 names. I put the phone face down. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. The technique is ancient because it works. By the time my Uber reached LaGuardia, the counter hit 29. On the plane, I finally scrolled. A dozen versions of the same message from Dan. We miss you. We want to make this right. We were just trying to help. Please call. A few from Brianna that read like a PowerPoint. Numbers, bullet points, insinuations. When I landed back in Phoenix, the number was 99. 99 missed calls in a year since they packed my life into boxes and wrote "handle it" like a dare. Joe watched me watch the phone out on the patio that evening while desert light made the world look like it had been dipped in honey. You're going to have to deal with him eventually, she said, not unkind. I did deal with him, I said, sharper than I meant. I stared at the mesquite leaves until they stopped quivering. By choosing not to answer. Not choosing is also a choice, she said. I'm not saying you owe anyone anything. I'm saying your peace is worth protecting on purpose, not just by avoidance. She was right, and I hated that she was right. I didn't sleep much. Around 3, the hour when honesty sneaks under the door, I made tea and sat in the glow from the stove, the little blue light painting the mug handle. Fear was there, old and particular. What if opening the door, even a crack, let the flood in? The following afternoon, my phone lit up with a call from Lena. I wanted to check in, she said. We've had an overwhelming response. A lot of women feel seen because of you. I felt a small ache behind my ribs. Gratitude, maybe. If my mess helps someone else skip the worst of it, I said, good. Also, she continued, we'd love a follow-up segment, more practical steps, maybe even a panel. Think about it. After I hung up, I sat very still. Doors were opening where walls used to be. It felt strange and good and scary. Then Monica called. Development on the house matter, she said. The title company flagged something. The notary listed for your signature has no record of you ever signing. She's adamant she didn't notarize those documents. Elaine, it looks like the signature was forged. For a second, the patio and the mesquite and the sound of a distant leaf blower went silent. Forgery takes what's already ugly and gives it teeth. What does that mean? I asked, voice thinner than I wanted. It means we have leverage, Monica said. We could pursue criminal charges, fraud, forgery, or we use it to negotiate a far better settlement. It depends on your goals, punishment, compensation, some combination. We will move exactly as you wish. I sat with that for hours. I pictured kindergarten Dan balancing a paper crown on his ears. I pictured 36-year-old Dan telling me my house was too much. I pictured myself in that hospital bed, tubes and monitors, calling my son 17 times, getting nothing back but a ringing tone turned into a wall. By sunset, I knew what I would do first: demand a conversation on my terms, in my place. If he wanted to talk, he would come where I could leave if it went sideways. I texted a single line: Copper Sands Cafe, tomorrow. 2 p.m., come alone. Copper Sands sits at the edge of a public park where the desert goes yellow in spring when the brittlebrush blooms. I arrived early and took the corner table that lets you see the door and the parking lot. Donna, the waitress who decided sometime in the last month that I required iced tea the instant I sat down, set 2 napkins by habit. Company, she asked. My son, I said, surprised by the way it caught in my throat. Family's complicated, she said, patting my shoulder. Holler if you need me to invent an emergency. At exactly 2, a silver rental slid into a spot. Dan climbed out, looked around, and spotted me. He hesitated at the door like a boy about to enter the principal's office. He walked over and sat. Up close, he looked older, circles under his eyes, a beard shadow that didn't suit him. Mom, he said. He didn't try to hug me. I didn't stand. We let the silence sit with us like a third person. You look good, he managed. Freedom agrees with me, I said. And the sunshine. He flinched. I deserve that. You deserve more than that, I said, then inhaled. But I didn't invite you here for a fight. Why did you invite me? He looked confused and hopeful and wrecked all at once. After a year of this. Curiosity, I said honestly, about what brings you here after you were so eager to get me into a facility and out of my house. Also, decency. We should say hard things to people's faces. He flushed. It wasn't about the money. No? I tilted my head. Because you ignored 17 hospital calls, then called me 99 times in 24 hours after you learned my investment income on national television. He opened his mouth and closed it. We were worried about you living alone. Worried people show up, I said. They don't sell your house while you're unconscious. He gripped his water glass like it might steady him. Brianna said, There it is, I said softly. What did Brianna say this time? He deflated. She said your finances could handle 10 years at a nice place. She said, he stopped. It doesn't matter what she said. It matters if you let it replace what you know about me, I said. Who signed my name on the sale documents, Dan? How did that happen when I was in the hospital? He swallowed. I don't know. She handled the paperwork. Your attorney tells me the notary says she never witnessed my signature, I said. That's a crime. Do you understand that? His face went sheet white. I didn't know. Mom, I swear to God, I didn't know. It was your job to know, I said. Kind, cold, true. You made choices that shoved me toward a future I never agreed to, in a place I didn't choose, with money I don't have to spend. And you did it while I was full of antibiotics and praying I didn't die alone. He stared at the table, jaw clenched. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I don't even know where to start making it right. One step at a time, I said, and not with words first, with actions. My attorney will propose a settlement reflecting fair market value for my half, plus compensation for the displacement. There will be no criminal charges if you cooperate. That's my line in the sand. He nodded so fast his head looked loose on his neck. Yes, whatever you want. I'll sign it. And after that, I added, we see whether there is anything to be rebuilt. Maybe, slowly, with boundaries. He wiped at his eyes with his knuckles like a boy. I want that more than anything. Do you? I asked. Or do you want access to what you saw on TV? His eyes met mine, level now. I want you. I want my mother. I know I didn't act like it. I held his gaze a long time. For the first time in months, I felt the hard shell around my heart flex. Not open, not yet. But the idea of mechanical movement returned, the possibility of hinges. We'll see, I said. You'll text, not call. I'll answer if I want. For now, we keep things simple. He nodded. Okay. When I stood up, I felt lighter. Not because anything was solved, but because I'd chosen the terms of whatever came next. I texted Monica from the parking lot. Draw it up. By Friday, the settlement language was in my inbox. Dan signed without a fight. Escrow released my share plus an extra $25,000 labeled emotional distress. Words on a page can't heal a year, but they can set a floor. A week later, Lena called again. The response hasn't slowed, she said. We'd love to have you back as a guest. More practical steps, more boundary talk. The messages from viewers. Elaine, people needed you. The person I used to be would have demurred to the point of vanishing. The person I was becoming said, yes, as long as we stick to principles and my family remains unnamed. Of course, Lena said. We'll protect your privacy. The day before I flew back to New York, Dan texted, dinner? There's a place on the bay people won't stop talking about. No pressure, just a meal. I stared at the message for a long minute. Then I typed, 1 hour, public place. We leave if either of us feels off. He wrote back within seconds. Deal. At the restaurant, he told me 2 things across a tablecloth stiff enough to stand on its own. First, he and Brianna were divorcing. Second, his company had offered him a lateral move to the Phoenix office. I'm considering it, he said, hands folded like a man trying to show he isn't hiding anything. Cost of living's better, weather's good, and he met my gaze. If there's any chance to rebuild, I want to be close enough to do the work. Boundaries, I said, like a liturgy. Boundaries, he agreed. And for once, it didn't feel like a word people wield as a club, but as a fence you build together so the garden grows. That night on Joe's patio, I told her the whole thing. She lifted her glass in a small salute. People are complicated, she said. Sometimes they're both the wound and the bandage. I'm not looking for a bandage, I said, but I am willing to look for scar tissue that doesn't ache. She grinned. That's a start. The second TV segment felt easier. I spoke with a financial advisor who specialized in women starting over. We talked about account titles and POAs and how to say no without apologizing for existing. Carmen asked about forgiveness and accountability, like Lena had promised she would. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite the past, I said. It just decides who has a say in your future. Boundaries aren't a lack of love. They're a way of loving yourself enough to keep what you've learned. After, Lena pulled me into a hallway and said, would you ever consider being part of a recurring panel? Let me see how this new chapter unfolds, I said, but maybe. The word felt wild in my mouth. Maybe. Possibility. Back in the hotel, I found a text from Dan. Watched the segment. Proud of you. I typed back, thank you. Home tomorrow. Dinner next week. On the flight into Phoenix, the desert looked like a map someone had burnished with gold leaf. A year ago, I'd flown here with a stomach stitched shut and a life in free fall. Now, I had a signed settlement, a bank account with teeth, the beginning of something like a calling, and a son who might, with time, relearn how to be my son. When the wheels touched down, my phone buzzed one more time, Approved for condo rental. Move in next month if the job offer finalizes. I didn't answer right then. Not yes, not no. I tucked the phone into my bag and walked out into the dry, bright air. The driver at the curb asked, "Where to?" "Home," I said. And it felt true. Not the old house with the white railing and the boxes on the porch, but the life I'd pieced together out of paperwork and backbone, and the soft, stubborn insistence that my dignity wasn't negotiable. The week after I got back from New York, the desert heat softened into something almost forgiving, and I realized I'd stopped bracing for the next shoe to drop. Monica emailed the executed settlement. Calvin moved the funds, and Joe insisted we celebrate with takeout tacos eaten under strings of patio lights that looked like a constellation someone forgot to put back in the sky. "Next item," Joe said, licking salsa from her thumb. "Your own place. You can't live behind my garage forever, even if I threaten to padlock the gate to keep you." I laughed. "I like it here." "You like it because it saved your life. That's different from it being where you start your next one." She bumped my shoulder with hers. "Let's go find you 4 walls and a view." We spent 3 mornings touring small condos that all smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and fresh paint. I made a list of what mattered: light, a little patio, a kitchen that felt like someone thought about where a person would set down a hot pan. On the 4th place, I stepped into a living room and knew. It wasn't fancy. Beige carpet the color of toasted almonds, a stubborn sliding glass door that'd need love, a tiny square of patio with a dwarf lemon tree that looked capable of kindness. "This one," I said, surprising myself with the certainty. "If the HOA doesn't require 10 kinds of permits to hang a wind chime." The listing agent, a brisk woman named Tara who spoke in bullet points, assured me the HOA was reasonable but awake, which is the best you can hope for. The seller was a retired nurse moving to be closer to her grandbabies. Her name was Sylvia. She walked me through the space like she was handing over a well-worn recipe. "Here's where the afternoon light hits the wall and makes it look like honey. Here's the drawer that sticks until you run a bar of soap along the edges. Here's the neighbor who collects your packages if you're gone more than 2 days." I made an offer the next morning, and thanks to the settlement funds and Calvin's steady hand, paid cash with enough left to keep my stomach from tightening at every headline. When the key went warm in my palm on closing day, I stood in the empty living room and whispered, "Hello," to the lemon tree, as if it were a person. Then I sat cross-legged on the floor, leaned my back against the cool wall, and listened to the quiet. Not the nervous quiet of waiting for a knock I didn't want to answer, but the kind of quiet that feels like an exhale. Nora flew in for a long weekend and helped me move my small life out of Joe's guest house. We hung sheer curtains that made the morning light look like it had manners. We put a thrifted table against the kitchen window and set it with 2 mismatched mugs, one with a chip I already loved. We framed a photo of Henry in the garden, hat crooked, grin wide. When I placed it on a shelf, my throat tightened, not with loss but with gratitude that the picture could live here without apology. Dan texted, "Congratulations. Proud of you. Tell me if you need a hand with anything." "Thank you," I typed back. "I'll let you know." He checked in once a week, brief, unfussy. A link to a local theater company when he found out I liked plays. A photo of the sky at sunset with a caption that read, "People say the Midwest does clouds better, but I'm not convinced." He kept his promise to text first, and I kept mine to answer, only when answering didn't feel like erasing myself. He took the Phoenix job. The day he signed the paperwork, he sent a photo of a key on his palm, small, ordinary, under fluorescent office light. Starting next month, the message read, "Nervous, hopeful." We met for coffee in a place that kept the music low. He asked about my book club's latest debate, mystery endings, tidy bow versus plausible mess, and I asked about his new boss, younger than me, and way too into standing meetings. We kept the conversation in the lines we'd painted together. It felt both stilted and good, like stretching muscles you haven't used in a while that ache and then remember the work. On a Tuesday, he sent, "Can I help you pick a couch this weekend? I know a place that does durable fabrics that aren't ugly." I stared at the message, unsure why the request made my eyes sting. He wasn't asking to choose for me. He was offering to lift the other end. "Yes," I wrote, "Saturday, 10 a.m. We'll get coffee first." He showed up on time in a blue shirt I remembered from a happier period, one I'd bought him for a birthday, when he got a promotion that felt like a door flung open. In the couch store, he deferred without playing helpless. "You sit," he said, "and I'll ask about lead times and whether the salesman is lying." "Everyone in retail is not a liar," I said, doing my best stern Nora impression. "Everyone in retail is an optimist," he said, grinning. And for a second I saw the kid who used to narrate his Lego builds like a sports announcer. We chose a slate-colored sofa that didn't make my lower back complain, and a pair of pillows in a pattern with small stitched lemons that felt like a private joke. At checkout, he reached for his wallet. "I've got it," I said quietly. "I know," he said, equally quiet, and put his wallet away. When the couch arrived, he was there to help slide it into place. He didn't linger. He didn't open my fridge. He stood in the doorway and said, "Looks right," like a benediction, and left before it became something else. The panel idea at the morning show turned into a monthly segment. Me, a forensic accountant with a laugh that made hard math sound friendly, and a therapist who specialized in adult family estrangements. The first time the three of us sat together, waiting for the red light, I wondered how in a year I'd gone from a woman weeping on a bare mattress to someone people asked for advice on live television. I didn't feel like an expert. I felt like an excellent collector of hard lessons. We talked about titled accounts and trusted contact forms, about the sentence, "I need to look that over and get back to you," which is the Swiss Army knife of personal finance, about how saying no doesn't have to be a brick wall, more like a gate that you open when trust is earned. After the third segment, I walked out of the studio into cool air that smelled like rain on hot concrete. I looked down at my phone and saw a text from a number I didn't recognize. My first name spelled correctly, the message precise and unshowy. "I'm 71. My daughter borrowed my checkbook after my hip surgery. Your story made me call my credit union and my lawyer. Thank you." I stood there on the sidewalk, tears streaming, because sometimes gratitude from a stranger feels like an arrow pointing in the same direction as your life. The legal case's final administrative flutters resolved like a slow machine coming to a stop. Monica sent one last tidy email. All obligations fulfilled. Case closed. She added a line that made me laugh out loud. "Go plant something." I did. I bought a bag of potting soil and tucked a small rosemary into the corner of the patio, then a pot of geraniums the color of a sunset I'd seen from an airplane window. I found a ceramic bird at a thrift store and set it on the wall where it could keep company with the lemon tree, which, if it could talk, would probably have told me to water more and fret less. Brianna didn't reach out. I learned through the community grapevine that she moved back to the Midwest. A friend texted a photo of her in a new kitchen with new countertops, smiling a new smile. I stared at it for a minute, not with nostalgia or rage, but with the detached curiosity you feel when you drive past a house you used to live in and notice they changed the shutters. I wished her nothing, which is different from wishing her harm. Nothing is a clean line. Dan learned Phoenix the way he does everything, by walking it until it made sense. He sent photos, a mural of saguaros painted on a cinder block wall, a tiny taqueria with a neon sign that looked 90 years old, his apartment, tidy to the point of monkish, save for a plant on the windowsill he named Walt. He didn't ask for more than I offered, and sometimes he offered less than I wanted, which is how trust grows, uneven, lopsided, real. One afternoon he texted, "I wrote you something, not an email, on paper. May I drop it off?" I told him to leave it with the doorman. When I got home from book club, lively, divided on whether the protagonist deserved redemption, I found an envelope with my name printed in his careful, old-fashioned script. I took it to the patio and read, "Mom, I've said, I'm sorry, but that feels like a stub compared to what I'm trying to hand you. So I wrote the thing down so I wouldn't fumble it. When Dad died, I thought my job was to fill a space I didn't understand. Brianna liked to make a plan and call it help. I liked letting someone else define what strong meant, because it absolved me from checking whether it was also kind. That's not an excuse. It's an autopsy report. I want to know how the thing died so I can keep it from happening again. I didn't show up at the hospital. I sold your house without your consent. I let someone forge your name and did not ask the right questions. I treated your life like logistics. Those are facts. I can't rewrite them. What I can do is live in a way that proves I understand their weight. Thank you for giving me a path that doesn't end at punishment. I will stay on it, even when it is slow and boring and no one claps. If you want to see my budget to make sure I'm not here because I want a piece of yours, I will show you. If you want to see my calendar so you know I'm not going to show up and wedge myself into your days, I will show you. I am asking for the chance to be your son again, not your decision maker, not your problem, just your son. Love, Dan." I folded the letter and sat there until the patio lights clicked on, the automatic timer reminding me that time moves whether you say yes or no. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I slept on it the way Henry always told me to sleep on anything that made my blood feel like it was boiling in my veins. The next morning, I made 2 lists. On the left, ways he could earn back trust, showing up when he says he will, respecting "not this week," without sulking, asking what I need instead of deciding. On the right, things I could do to not sabotage something I said I wanted, say what I mean the first time, not punish him for Brianna's voice in his head, remember that I set the boundaries and can adjust them too. I texted him a photo of the lists and wrote, "I'm willing to try. We'll review these in 3 months and 6 months. If either of us thinks we're drifting, we say so then, not 5 years from now in a therapist's office." He sent back a single word, "Deal." Joe called that afternoon. "You sound weird," she said. "Good weird." "Like I've put down a heavy pan and I'm waiting to see if it leaves a mark on the counter," I said. "That is weird," she said. "Also poetic. Come over. I made lemon bars." "Did you steal lemons from my tree?" "Borrowed," she said. "I'll pay you back in butter and sugar." The months found their shape. I did the panel in New York, then a new thing online with a nonprofit that teaches classes to women who never got a say in money. Divorced, widowed, immigrant, anyone whose life had been spent making a budget stretch instead of making it grow. The first night I logged into the small squares and saw 18 faces. I felt my hands go cold. Then one of them said, "You're the TV lady." And I replied, "I'm the lady who made every mistake you can make and came out with both dignity and a to-do list." And all of us laughed the way women laugh when they recognize each other across a distance. I wrote a small guide with the accountant from the show, 10 chapters, short, the kind you can read on a lunch break or between caregiving shifts, full of scripts you can borrow when your mouth goes dry. When the publisher sent the proof copy, I held it like a baby and then set it down and made dinner, because that's what you do when life is good. You wash lettuce and remember the years it wasn't, and you don't make a shrine to either. Dan and I built a rhythm that respected the newness. He came to water aerobics on a Thursday and stood at the edge of the pool while my instructor taught him how to make his core do the work so his lower back wouldn't. He helped me hang a shelf that wanted to defy gravity. He told me when something at work went well and did not call me when something went poorly, which felt right at this stage, honesty without dependence. On a Saturday, he texted, "There's a community theater production of Our Town. 2 tickets with your name on them if you say yes." We sat in the dark, side by side, hands on our own knees, and listened to actors say words about ordinary life in ordinary houses that made me want to press my palm against my heart. At the end, when the lights came up, he cleared his throat. "Do you remember when Dad took us to see this when I was, 11? 13, I said. "You were furious because you thought it'd be boring, and then you cried." "I cried quietly," he said, mock indignant. "You cried like someone turned on a faucet," I said, and we both laughed, the kind that loosens something behind your ribs. In the spring, my surgeon's office called to schedule a follow-up scan. The nurse's voice was the same brisk kindness from a year ago. "Routine," she said. "We like to check in." I went alone. I didn't tell Dan, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. The scan was clean. The doctor looked pleased, and I walked out into sun so bright I had to shade my eyes. I sat in my car and texted Dan, "Clean bill of health. Tacos to celebrate?" He wrote back, "Name the place." We went to the spot Joe loves, where the tortillas come hot and the salsa has a kick that feels like a dare. He said, "I was going to offer to go with you if you wanted." I said, "I know." We let that be enough. 6 months after his letter, I pulled up the photo of our 2 lists and checked off more than half the items. He'd earned back things I didn't think he would. I'd given grace in places I swore I wouldn't. We were not who we'd been, which is the point of doing this work at all. Lena emailed to ask if I'd keynote a small conference they were hosting in partnership with a credit union network. "We'll fly you to Minneapolis," she wrote, "put you up in a very beige hotel, and ask you to talk for 30 minutes about what women over 60 know that the rest of the world keeps forgetting." I thought about the beige hotel, the 30 minutes, the faces in the room. I said yes. On stage, under lights that made the air look like it had dust motes floating in it, I told the truth without the decorative edges, that most of us are taught to apologize for existing and then surprised when life takes us at our word. That power is not a dirty word. That wanting safety and insisting on respect is not being hard. It's being alive and paying attention. During the Q&A, a woman in the second row asked, "How do you forgive a son who sold your house while you were in the hospital?" The room went quiet in the way rooms do when everyone feels like they might break if they breathe wrong. "You decide whether forgiveness is a relationship or a choice," I said. "Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's neither. What you don't do is confuse forgiveness with access. Access is earned. Forgiveness is optional. Your dignity is not." Afterward, she found me in the hallway, and we stood there, 2 strangers not hugging because we were both trying not to cry. "Thank you," she said, which is what women say when they mean, "I thought I was alone, and now I'm not." On my 64th birthday, Joe threw a backyard potluck and invited everyone who'd ever handed me a glass of water or a decent joke. The table looked like abundance, deviled eggs, and the kind of salad no one admits is mostly mayo. Mangoes sliced into orange crescents, a cake with candles that tried their best. Dan arrived with a bouquet bought at a grocery store and a card he'd made himself because he'd waited too long and refused to bring something impersonal. Inside, he'd written a line Henry used to say whenever I did something that surprised him in the best way. "Look at you, kiddo." We sang. I blew out candles. I didn't wish. I gave thanks out loud, because wishes feel secret and thanks feel like prayer. Later, when everyone had gone, and the patio was a map of empty plates, and the air smelled like matches and laughter, Dan lingered at the gate. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, hands tucked in his pockets like a teenager in a doorway. "You can say no. It won't be a test." My stomach did that thing it does when a question is coming, old animal responses waking up, but I nodded. "Ask." "I'd like to take you to see the old neighborhood, Juan," he said. "Not the house, never that. Just the park, the bakery we used to go to after church, the bench where Dad taught me how to tie a tie because we were late and you were mad." I waited for the punch in the gut that didn't come. Instead, an image arrived. A woman sitting in a car on a street she no longer lives on, looking at a bakery that probably changed the frosting recipe. "Someday," I said. "Not now." He smiled, not disappointed, just present. "Someday," he repeated. "When you say." He hugged me then, careful, one-armed, like I was a person he didn't want to drop, and left. I turned off the patio lights and stood in the dark long enough for the desert to sound like it does when the city finally shuts up, a hum you can hear if you hold your breath. In the fall, the lemon tree put out 3 gleaming fruits, as if to prove a point about patience. I took a photo with my hand beside them for scale and texted Joe, "Look what we did," even with my watering schedule that could be described as aspirational. She replied with a string of lemon emojis and an invitation to make pie. We did, and it was messy and perfect, the crust slightly too brown, and the filling just on the right side of tart. The next time I flew to New York, the flight attendant said, "Welcome back," as if I were a regular. I thought about the woman who'd flown there the first time with fear pressed flat inside her like a leaf in a dictionary. I wished I could tell her everything that would unfold. The letter, the lists, the lemon tree, the way forgiveness can look like a slow, daily practice rather than a single bright absolution. When I landed home, the sky had that high blue clarity that makes your shoulders drop, all by themselves. The driver rolled down his window and asked, "Where to?" "Home," I said, and gave him my address without explaining what that word means to me now. Not the split level where I taught a boy to make pancake batter without turning the kitchen into a snowstorm. Not the porch where boxes once sat like a dare. Not even the neat little condo with the stubborn sliding door. Home is the state of being where my name on a document is mine alone, where the money I live on is something I understand, where the people in my life know I love them, and also where the fence is and why it's there. I unlocked my door, set my bag down, and listened. The place made the small welcomes, the hum of the fridge, the whisper the air makes coming through vents, the faint, spicy smell of rosemary from the patio. I poured a glass of water, drank it standing up in my kitchen like a person who trusts the ground, and laughed because there's nothing remarkable about water in a glass unless you've survived the desert. A week later, Dan and I walked the Greenbelt Trail near my place. We didn't talk about the past or the future. We pointed out a hawk on a light pole, a kid wobbling on a too-big bike, a dog that looked like a dust mop with ambition. At one point, he said, "I almost called you last night to ask you what to do about work, and then I realized I know what to do." "And?" I asked. "I did that," he said, "and it was right." That's how you know you're not auditioning for the role of grown-up anymore, I said. You just are one, he laughed. I wish they handed out certificates. They do, I said. They're called utility bills and showing up on time. We sat on a bench. The late sun turned the world warm. He pulled something from his pocket and handed it to me. An old Polaroid from the Split Level's backyard. Henry in his hat. Dan in a shirt he'd outgrown immediately. Me in shorts. I would not wear today if you paid me. All of us squinting into the light. I found it in a box, he said. I thought it belonged with you. Thank you, I said, and didn't add a single other word, because sometimes you let gratitude land without rearranging it into a speech. That night, I put the photo on the shelf next to Henry's garden picture, the two images like bookends holding a story that has a beginning I cherish, a middle I survived, and a present I am writing on purpose. I sat at my small table, opened my laptop, and wrote an email to Lena. Subject: panel topic idea for when the calls come after the numbers air high. Friend. People ask how to deal with family when the money becomes visible. I think we should do a segment called When They Call Because They Saw Your Light. Scripts, step-backs, safety rails. Let's help the next woman answer her phone, or not, with a plan and a spine. Best, Elaine. I hit send. Outside, a neighbor's wind chime made a small, contented sound. I went to the patio, pinched a sprig of rosemary, and rubbed it between my fingers until the scent rose. A little wild, a little medicinal, exactly like the life I choose now. The phone buzzed once more on the table. A text from Dan. Sky looks like someone painted it with a grapefruit. You seeing this? I stepped into the yard and looked up. The horizon glowed a color that doesn't have a proper name. I typed back, I see it. He responded with a photo. I put my phone down without saving it because you don't need proof when you have the thing itself. I stood there until the light thinned, and the desert did that trick again, where it shifts to quiet like a room when everyone you love has finally fallen asleep. I went inside and locked my door, not from fear but because I could. In bed, I thought of the woman on the tile floor, the boxes on the porch, the bright red tally light, the 99 missed calls, the single text I sent that began to pull my life back into my own hands. I whispered into the dark, "Look at you, kiddo," and let myself believe it. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. If it resonated with you, please support it with a like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Tell me in the comments where you were listening from. What city are you in? I read every comment. See you soon with a new story.